Now today, what I wanted to touch upon was something to do with email deliverability and website forms. Um, let's see the best way of just, it's, I need to go back a few steps to explain what that mouthful means. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to first start off by recapping a few little things about domain names and all that stuff, because every week I seem to have to go through it with people, and that's fine. I mean, this is the whole purpose of the company, is to explain these things. But we live and breathe in this area, so understanding the fact that other companies out there, they don't understand the differences between, say, website hosting, email hosting, and domain names. Having to explore that explain that is a very important thing, and that does then segue nicely into what I wanted to talk about with how we've solved or how we've addressed a particular problem in terms of email deliverability from website forms. So quick plug, and then let's switch over to a little diagram that I did. Oh, there we are. I'm in the corner. Oh, hang on, I'm blocking something. If I move myself, that's better. Right. So all I want to do is to go through here is to help set the stage for some future discussions, not just in this talk, but in other upcoming ones as well. So let's pretend for a moment you're a startup company and you think, oh, great, we've decided upon our company name. Now we want a website. Now we want to have email and all that stuff. So one of the first things that companies do is they buy a domain name. And they buy a domain name from, essentially, it's really called a registrar. And the registrar bit should give the game away a little bit, because it is a registry service. And you might recognize some of these example names that popped up under here: 123reg, GoDaddy. So when you register your domain name, and in our case, our main domain name is Glass Mountains Co.uk, you tend to, a good way of thinking about it is that you're renting it. You may be renewing it on a annual basis, or every 2 years, or even longer, 5 and 10 years. But I think the important thing there is to realize that that's all you're doing really, is that you're reserving the right to use that domain name for other purposes, like email, like website hosting. It doesn't on its own give you anything else. It's just like a little handle, nothing else. Now you might buy multiple domain names. I'm sure, like, Glass Mountains, I'm sure we got .com, or we got .agency, or a few others like that. But those are what I would call secondary domain names, and they point back to, or they click back through to the main domain name. So in reality, a company in general terms will only have one main domain name, and that's what we're talking about there. So that's the domain name, and on its own, that's all you get. After that, you're going to need somebody to handle your emails. Email is obviously an essential business service. Let me just check if I've got any comments. Have I got the comments window open? Yeah, I have. That's good. Email is obviously a massively important service, so we need to get that set up. I mean, I'm not an IT infrastructure company, so I would normally refer, who do I refer to? Oh, there's Jim, is it Jim Lewington? Yeah, Jim Lewington of Orbit's IT. I think they're based in Cardiff. There's As of A to Z Computing in Newport, but we don't provide email in-house, but we will make recommendations where companies need that. Now, the Glass Mountains Co.uk email, and whilst you wouldn't know that, we use Google Apps for that. So we use Google's infrastructure. Obviously, Google have got pretty industrious infrastructure. It's pretty much bulletproof. And it comes with other facilities, not just email. You get like you get your shared calendar and all that. You get online calendar. You'll get access to Google Docs and all that stuff. And of course, there are other providers. Microsoft is another great option to use. The point I'm making here is that we want to use a good, solid provider for any services which we need. Because if we just flick back up here a minute and look at things like 123reg and GoDaddy, and I'm not singling these companies out, and another caveat is that they may well be fantastic in these areas now, but I don't know. But the point I'm making is that I would ideally say, find a specialist to do your individual services. When you buy a domain name at something like 123reg, Heck, they'll say, do you want us to set up email? Do you want us to set up your website hosting? Well, all right, if it works for you, fine. But I would rather deal with specialist companies for those things. So just because they can sell it to you doesn't mean which you would. And I'm more than happy. I mean, we get most of our domain names, or I would recommend clients get their domain names from 123reg. It works perfectly for that. But just be careful what you're walking into if you use their other services. So definitely, the company, this new startup we're talking about, they've got the new domain name, great. They've chosen an email provider. That could be Google Apps, that could be Microsoft, or whoever. They've made an active choice on it. So then, they can set up their webmail or their email client on their phone or on their computer, and they can send emails on their domain name. So they got domain name and they got email. They haven't got a website yet, so they suddenly go next, wait, we want a website. That's when they need to hire a company such as ours, Glass Mountains, to design them a fantastic website. But even designing the website, that needs to be hosted somewhere. And this is where website hosting comes into it. And this is another thing which somebody like 123reg or GoDaddy might try and sell to you. But again, our job as a company is to help divorce clients from having to worry about too much nitty-gritty stuff and to inform them in clearer terms as to what decisions they need to make, and then also to keep an eye out and abreast on changes in technology so that we can keep them up to date. So with website hosting, because we are 99.9% of the time, our output will be WordPress. We can do other technologies, but in general, 99.9 or whatever, it'll be WordPress. So we will then choose appropriate hosting, which is why you're seeing some examples here. Flywheel, WordPress only hosting. There are cheaper hosts, but this isn't about being cheap. We need to have a good hosting, solidly set up for WordPress. If you speak to any of the support on Flywheel, the only technology they deal with is WordPress. So you're already in a safer environment. You're in an environment which has been created from an infrastructure purpose to deal with WordPress. So from the perspective of security, it's better. So Flywheel is one we used to use WP Engine a lot more. They're still a great company, but for us and for the clients, we tend to use Flywheel, tends to be a better fit. And that just kind of goes back to the point I was just making then, really, about we're constantly on the lookout for what is the best technology to use in certain circumstances. We, in fact, tend to use a company called Cloudways to do a lot of our hosting. Now, they're not WordPress specific, but because we got so much WordPress expertise in-house, we don't always need some of the WordPress bells and whistles which the other companies add, because we can, for the managed clients, we can do that for them. Whereas if a client came to us and they wanted to host themselves, we'd make sure they're set up on Flywheel, and when they go on their way, we can kind of go, yeah, they're going to be generally looked after. Because of course, if the client speaks to Flywheel support on live chat, they're gonna get some sensible answers there. They're not dealing with a company who's got to deal with all manner of technology, because it's going to be really, really hard for them. So we talked about email provider, we've talked about website hosting, DNS hosting. I'm not going to dwell too much on that, but that's another one which is, you could easily use the 123reg or GoDaddy by default, even though in reality the DNS hosting is very, very important. It's another essential cog in the machine, and if that doesn't work very well, then it can let the site down. We tend to use a service called Cloudflare for the DNS hosting. Not only has it got very strong DNS services, and strong DNS is very good because without DNS, your website, and in fact all your services, will go down, but it also offers a lot more out of the box. It offers things like security. So it's got a web application firewall. So that's another layer of security which we can wrap around a website. And they offer loads of stuff. And I'm just scratching the surface here. They only just announced, I think it was the last week or so, some even more advanced WordPress acceleration facilities, which I think, according to Ben on my team, that used to be bundled with their $200 a month account, but now I think you can get it for $5 a month. And the tests that we've done on that are fantastic. So again, and what I'm trying to do here is to show you that DNS hosting. There's a lot which you can look at there. Website email. Right, again, that's another separate service. So I think to best answer that one, and I might come back to this slide, let's just look at what I mean here. Are we still here? Fine. Oh, there's Pete. Right. Okay, Pete. I think you might be. I might answer that. Pete's saying, if I can, can I drag that onto the screen? Yay. What's the difference between email provider and website email? Good one, Pete. That's a great question. So let's look at my contact form here on the Glass Mountains website, and I think you should see similarities with your own. You've got your basic contact details on there. It's very much a bog standard kind of page, your address, any basic details, and we've got the email address, and you may well have a contact form. Now, some people might say, oh, I just want to have the email address on there. Some people might just have a contact form. I would say have both. Let it be the choice of the person visiting your website as to what method they want to use to contact you. For me, I tend to like website forms. For one reason, if I click mail to here, it'll try and launch the client, the email client, the bit of software, Apple Mail, I think it is on my Mac. But I don't use that, see, because I use Gmail. Well, it's not Gmail, it's obviously Glass Mountains, but I use the webmail version of it. So I don't want to click those links because whilst I could configure my local email client, I'm kind of used to using the webmail. So I tend to use web forms, and a lot of people do. So a web form, as you guys are undoubtedly aware, pretty much looks like this. It's going to have a few fields on it, slight aside. The fewer fields, the better. The more fields you add, the more drop-off you'll have to it. So on the contact form, name, email, phone, and message. Bog standard stuff, yeah? Click send. Now what happens? The form submits, and the form goes back to the website host. And the website host then will, under the surface, it will use its services to send that email. And that can cause problems because they're using a service there. And historically, certainly we found over the years, website hosts can use a poor email deliverability service. In general, they've got better at it. But we solve that problem by saying, okay, we need better accountability of how these emails are being sent. Because to give you a bit of context there, let's say we're running a website for a company, yeah? We support a website for a company, and they drop us an email and say, we've had some comments that people are sending contact emails, but we're not getting them. Well, there's a lot you need to investigate there, of course. That immediately raises questions about spam filters and stuff like that. But what we need to do as a company then, we need to be able to investigate and solve those problems. We want to be able to look at logs. We want to be able to get information about it. Because without any kind of logs, any kind of debug facilities, you're left in a situation where you go, well, I'll visit the website, I'll put my details in there, and if I get the email, then, well, okay, that's fine. But of course, well, what does that prove? It proves it works for you, but it doesn't prove anything else. So out of frustration a few years ago with being unable to debug some of these issues for clients, we elected to switch over the handling of email on a website to not the website host, but to a third-party service. And it's important to note that this is different from the email provider. We're talking specifically here about how your website sends emails on your behalf, because that's what it's doing, of course. When Joe Blogs comes to this contact form and says, we would like you to create a £1 million website, I have those kind of queries every day. I need that email to come to me. I need it to be able to arrive in my inbox, because this is the purpose of the website for many people. It's to help convert anonymous website visitors into conversations which we can hopefully then convert into paying customers. So it's important that we get these contacts. So there are services which we can plug in, which are, again, what we look at here, what you've seen all along here are where we've chosen dedicated services. We've chosen dedicated services for email, dedicated services for hosting, dedicated services for DNS, and it's the same with handling the sending of emails from the website. We happen to use a service called Mailgun. There are plenty of others. There's SendGrid as well. We used to use SendGrid. I can't remember why we changed. There was a reason, but they're both great services. And if we flick over to, say, the Mailgun homepage, I might have to zoom in a little bit. I don't know how quickly, I don't know how easily this is for you. But you should see there, quite straightforwardly, the email service for developers. So this company solely exists for all the things around the sending of emails. They're not about handling email in the sense of Google or Microsoft. This is more about the sending of it and providing the facilities for it. And what they offer are two really important things for us. For one thing, the deliverability of email is very much about trust. We've all heard about spam issues, and there are steps which we need to take to improve the likelihood, or is it, no, lessen the likelihood of our emails looking like spam. So one thing about something like Mailgun is that if we start to use those services on our website, which we do, going back to our diagram, website hosting, going back to our contact form, when that submit sends, behind the scenes, it's not the website host which will send the email, it's going to be this dedicated service like Mailgun. And out of the box, that's better. It's better because the servers, the email servers which send those emails from Mailgun, they're invariably more trusted than the email servers of a broad hosting company. Even good companies like this, and they're certainly going to be better than broad hosting or internet registration companies like 123reg. So immediately by using something like Mailgun, we're improving the deliverability of our email. And I must say something quickly about costs here. It's very, very cheap to use. In fact, I think their basic plan is free up to 1,000 emails or something along those lines. So you're talking very, very limited costs here to use Mailgun. I'm not going to go through all of the setup of something like Mailgun because it does get a little bit nerdy, but if I see comments about it, or if I have comments after I put the YouTube video live, then I'm happy to do it, but it's a lot more step by step. I just want to check something. Pete, did that answer that question about your difference between email provider and website email? You might well be thinking, why can't I use my Google or Microsoft to send it from the website? Hopefully what I've got into there helps explain it. Certainly the next step as well. So I mentioned about deliverability being a really important thing for using these dedicated services. Another thing is the logging that's built into it. Let's go back to what I mentioned earlier, where say a client comes to us and says, oh, X, Y, and Z said they sent an email, but we didn't receive it. Well, without any kind of auditing or logging, you're lost a bit. You've got nothing which you can look at. Whereas services like Mailgun, and I mean, some website services offer this now as well, but we know we get it out of the box with Mailgun. With something like Mailgun, don't know if you can see the screen, probably would need to zoom into it a bit, but I'm not too bothered about that. But you can go to things like logs, and then you can see every individual email. So the beauty of this is that if a client says, okay, so X, Y, such and such said they sent an email yesterday at 3 o'clock and we didn't receive it, we can go in and we can look at the logs for that time and we can see what happened. We can see, was it a successful email or was there an issue? I mean, sometimes there can be issues like we couldn't send the email to the client, and it'll come back with an error code. So finally, you've got some debugging and auditing which you can put in place. Now, for people out there who are thinking, look, I don't want to look at those logs, that's completely fine. Just using something like Mailgun will be an improvement for you. Now, off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure somebody like WP Engine, going here, uses something like SendGrid or Mailgun under the service, or at least they use aspects of this service. But we, as more of a development support company, we like to have that control about the account ourselves, because we want to be able to go in and look at all of these logs, because there have been occasions we've spoken to website hosting companies before, and they've been unable to tell us anything about these deliverability logs, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem, that can be really, really frustrating. So it probably seems like a minor point, but it's so important that we've got very strong deliverability and reliability and auditability, no more abilities to track on the end there, of our website forms. Because for many websites, that is the key purpose of them, is to help convert that anonymous traffic into people we can speak to. So whether it's a contact form or a quote request form or something else, it's absolutely the beating heart of that website. And whilst those website forms can tend to seem to work just out of the box when we put them onto any old hosting, that's not quite the same as going that extra step and making sure we've done our best to maintain deliverability, enhance deliverability of emails. And I've done this for people before. So, I mean, let's just drill into the DNS hosting a bit more. So here we are looking at the DNS records for Glass Mountains. Now, don't worry, I know I'm not trying to fry your brain here, but what I'm trying to show you, if I zoom in a little bit, we've got these TXT records, and you might see DKIM here, you might see SPF. Both of those refer to email deliverability, okay? They both refer to who we are saying, as the company who owns this domain name, who we are saying can send emails on our behalf. So our SPF and DKIM records, they're saying, well, Google can, because remember, we said that Google services send emails and receive on our behalf because we use their services. We also have records in place to make sure that the world at large knows that our website, which has its own IP address, which is hosted somewhere, that is allowed to send on our behalf. We have records in place to show that, well, it's not just the website now, it's the fact that Mailgun can send records on our behalf. So there is a bit of nerdy technical stuff which needs to be done on these domain names. And when we get called in to help with email deliverability, even if it's just your normal email, not the website, we will invariably have to take steps to make sure all of these records are in place. Because you've got to bear it in mind for how the internet works. If there's somebody out there who's never received an email from you before and you send it to them, you've got to bear in mind all the steps that email goes through, and the behind the scenes hidden steps, and the steps where the filters are going, is this person allowed to send that email on your behalf? Because spam is such a huge problem with email, that getting our configuration right, doing what we can to make sure our emails go into people's inboxes, is absolutely crucial. So I think that's really what I wanted to get at today. If there was one point, it was simply sort of ask yourself what kind of configuration and deliverability you've got in terms of the forms on your website. If you've got no clue about that, maybe send, just as a test, maybe send your hosting company an email that says, oh, make it up. Say, oh, we had somebody say yesterday at 3 o'clock, they sent an email from our form, if you've got a form on your website, and we didn't get it. We checked our spam, but it's not in there. Can you tell us anything? And depending on what they come back with, bearing in mind first level support can tend to be pretty ropey on, on many hosting companies. If they come back with, oh no, we can't give you any information on that, see, that's the concern, and that's why we would use somebody like Mailgun, because we want to have those logs. We want to be able to go in and find out what's what. So like even for clients who we don't actively support, if we've developed their website and they want us to set these things up, we'll get them set up with Mailgun because we know it'll just work out the box. And we know that if we get called in to solve a problem, we've already got that tracking and login in place. Because I mean, if we get called in to solve a problem and we haven't got this login, well, the first thing we'll do, we'll have to put it into place because we need to have that going forward. Otherwise, you're just guessing in the dark a little. Right, so I think, you know, that's coming up to half an hour. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to chat about today. Keep it short and sweet. You got any questions on that? Then please do, by all means, let me know. And that just leaves me to say, you know, you guys have a lovely weekend and enjoy yourself.